Deus, 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 Ave Dominus tecum, Deus, what will we do to save us from this pestilence? The plague hath arisen on us. We must call to the Most High to deliver us. Let the sickness be off and the power of God be upon us. This stream is brought to you in part by cigarettes. Enjoy one today. I know I sure will. Hey, I'm not promoting marijuana smoking. I tried both, and tobacco is where it's at. You know what I'm saying? After I smoked that weed, I got all frightened, like, what's that noise? Is someone over there? But I didn't, ever even want to do it again after tasting it too. It tasted awful, but the cigarette, I can't put it down. The title of the stream, Whispers of COVID-19. Welcome. It's probably best if you're not watching this live and you do watch it on a replay and fast forward it at twice the speed. So it speeds up what I'm saying, because sometimes I can't think of what to say and I speak really slowly, and it's just more entertaining then for you to listen to it twice the speed, because then my ideas sound a little bit better. I sound a whole lot smarter. I sound like I have a little bit more wit than I really do. I'll sit here and contemplate and talk less and less. And then eventually there's more pauses and spaces in my program than there is me talking. But I do have plenty to say today, because I have been watching every YouTube video about this coronavirus. And there's been some wild things popping up on YouTube surrounding it. And I know not everyone else has the time to go through all these videos, and so they haven't heard everything, and there's different things here and there. I also have, criticism to make against some of these wilder conspiracy theories surrounding the virus, as well as I got my own criticism against the standard explanations. I have read, some things, various things from like the official Chinese reports, medical reports, to like wildly speculative things. And I'll go through it all right now. Where to start? Okay, so it's been going on for over a month now, of where the general, public in the world, we've seen it on YouTube and stuff, have heard about this. That something's going on in China where a lot of people are dying of an illness that spreads very quickly. It's very deadly. It has a high mortality rate. Now the question is, this is the, our truth for the coronavirus. Is it going to be really, really horrible? Is it going to spread over the whole world? Or is it on the decline? I happened to see a video yesterday on YouTube. It had like 0 views. And it was a Chinese guy talking in English so I could understand him. And he was saying he was a truck driver in the whatever they call where that Wuhan city is. But he was in the province, so the countryside. I think it's called like the Gudang or something. And he said that the roadblocks were being removed and he could drive his truck and make deliveries starting yesterday. So they are trying to say that the thing's kind of like past its peak and things are getting improved in China. Now, on the other hand, in the last 2 days, there's been a spike in the number of cases of this illness outside of China. It's gone up about, it's quadrupled. People are dying now outside of China, but it's very small numbers. So it's hard to say, is it going to spread like it did in China and other parts of the world? My idea is, you know, what everyone who talks about it is implying is that it's a disease that can spread very easily. But I really question that, because that's treating the disease as like this physical thing, like the cigarette, you know, like I could hand my cigarette to you, you take the cigarette from me, now you have the cigarette, right? And, you know, people could pass out cigarettes over the whole world, right? And so like this disease could be passed around the whole world. Now, I think there's a geographical basis to the illness. Like it could only break out in the city of Wuhan because of like the nature of the thing. It's geographical in part. That's part of the whole illness, you know? And I don't think there might, you know, there's going to be like a big spreading of it beyond. But now this leads me into, you know, some of the speculation. It's kind of interesting because where you see the largest number of cases now outside of China, they're reporting, is in Iran, South Korea, and Italy. Iran, South Korea, and Italy. Now, this is peculiar because in South Korea, most of the cases were linked to a cult. There was a cult, and it got spread amongst the members. And a lot of people are speculating that it could be some sort of doomsday cult where they're trying to perpetuate some sort of mass disease on the world as a form of like punishment from God or something. And this kind of thing, you know, people were even, you know, talking about this when the virus, since the virus has appeared. Like there was a movie by Terry Gilliam, who was one of the Monty Python guys, you know, from The Holy Grail and The Life of Brian. Terry Gilliam, he made The 12 Monkeys. It's like a sci-fi movie, and it's a very great one. I mean, it's like a psycho thriller sci-fi movie. It's one of the best movies I've ever seen. It's very disturbing though, and one of the aspects of it, there's a bunch of different things in there. It's totally bizarre, you know, because there's stuff about like insanity, time travel, but one of the parts of it is a virus that's a bioweapon that gets released by a religious fanatic, right? And we've heard about this for years, and honestly, I'm not buying this story. I'm just laying out, you know, what I heard on some other channels. And they're saying that this cult in South Korea could have intentionally spread the disease. Now the question becomes, was it like someone went to Wuhan and got sick when the epidemic started and then brought it back and spread it within the church? Or did the cult start it? Because they have this cult in Wuhan. There's people in it, though it's based in South Korea, where these hundreds of people have come down with it. They did have people in China too, and Wuhan, and that's been shown. So could it have been a member from there went into this biolab and took out these viruses? And interestingly enough too, I was listening to this doctor just now who made a report like 10 minutes ago saying he was talking to a doctor in Iran where they're having these cases now, and they're saying that they think it's a different strain of the COVID virus. And we've all heard there's various strains. This one's different and happening in China than one they had before in like 2003 called SARS, but they're similar. So could it have been that someone went to that lab and stole the disease and spread it? And so there's a few different versions of it. This is where I think it's interesting that Iran in Italy are where they're having the outbreaks now. And they had it in this cult in South Korea. Iran is a center of religion, of course. They're a theocracy. Italy is the kind of the ancestral home of the church. So it's really, that's really strange. And they've had cases in Israel as well, although not as many. And those could have been Chinese, Israeli people. I don't know. Hey, what's this tattoo of, says Evie in the chat. I don't know which one. I have a couple. This one that you can see now. What is that? There's an apple with a skull in it. So it's like, you know, the skull of death in the apple, the garden, right? The Garden of Eden. There's the serpent. It's a cobra. And it's eating the apple, which isn't exactly how the story went. But I have a feeling that the serpent tasted the apple before Eve had it. So he knew to give it to Eve, right? He had to have known what was in the apple by tasting it himself. I didn't get these tattoos in jail. I've never gone to jail. I got them on a whim. So back to what I was saying about this spreading of the virus being linked to a cult. I mean, this is completely bizarre. And it does come from that Terry Gilliam script for 12 Monkeys too. Just like I said, my question is, I think it is intentional that there were people spreading it. Obviously, we've seen videos of people spreading it, but I mean, before we were thinking that they were people who were just like pissed off and angry and just spreading it out of sheer evil. But is there an organized effort to spread it done by a religiously fanatic cult is the question. And definitely there was in South Korea. The question is, did they start it, or did that happen after the spread began? And I think that's a question that will get answered probably. And it could end up just being something too like, oh, they're not really a cult and they just did some sort of practice where like they all shared the same sort of like bath or something is what they're saying. Like they do baptisms, like every time they go to church, all the members. So they were all together in a pool. And so they're into a pool together with someone who had the virus or something like that. That's what I heard. But did they do that on purpose? Did some people know about it? I don't know. It could be. Interestingly enough, I watched True News, and the guy, that ethnic looking, you know, Filipino, Mexican looking guy, he said something like, oh, my girlfriend's brother's South Korean and he's in that church. And they were saying like it's an attack on the church. Like there are people using the virus to attack God and that kind of thing. But it's kind of interesting, you know, because, well, he said he was in the army and he was in the church. And I read a story yesterday that said the Korean army is investigating this. So this could really be a biological attack being done by a faction that's both it's both been radicalized religiously and it's militarized within the South Korean element. And we don't know what's happening in North Korea. They could have a ton of people sick in North Korea. Who knows? Another thing too, Iran and Italy and South Korea are reporting to have all these cases. We don't know about other countries though, because I think in the United States, there's cases. And the media here is not talking about it. But they're talking about it a little. You can find out about it, and you can find out on like local news websites. So it's not like it's completely unknown, but there's no like national coverage. So yesterday there was a man in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm guessing he was a Chinese man from China who's also a U.S. citizen. He had this sickness and he was in Arizona and he stopped being sick. He was cured, right? And they let him out yesterday, out of quarantine. He's back at home. Will he infect anyone else? Is it possible to infect people after you've caught it and recovered? I feel like this has happened so quickly that who knows, you know? I really think truly that it's just the flu. Honestly, you know, I listened to this gym guy and he's like, oh, it's just the flu. And I'm like, yeah, it's just the flu, man. Like, China's like set up for like a really bad flu. I mean, sometimes the flu can be bad. People have had flu epidemics. There was, you know, a flu epidemic, they're saying like 1918 or something that killed millions. And it could just be like a really awful flu. And for whatever reason, something in the Chinese diet, and I'm not talking about bat meat, I'm just saying like their health in China, the average person's health is not as good as it is in the West. And so the flu kind of breaks out more amongst them. And their immune systems aren't as good just because of their conditions of their life and their genetics too, or whatever. And that's why you see all these Chinese people getting it. I really think it's just the flu. But, you know, like I said, in the last 2 or 3 days, the number of cases and deaths outside of China have like quadrupled. It's still very small. It's still like a number, like, I think it's like less than 20, but up until like 3 days ago, it was 0. And so if it keeps rising, like, you know, the number's been rising in China, that would be something to watch. And since you're watching this now and listening, and it's February 22nd, I started watching the stuff happening in China about January, I want to say like 12th or something. So it didn't really break out in China until I think the 23rd or something, or the 22nd, when all those people started going to the hospital. So right now, you know, I would say we have, you know, 3 weeks or a month before they will really know if it's spreading outside of China or not and taking a hold. My guess is it's not going to. My guess is it's like geographically based. Like, it's kind of like some sort of thing in the air that's just hanging around China. And that's why you see, like, in China, they're going around and just like spraying the air with a Lysol or whatever they're spraying with it. They're probably spraying the Wuhan with Zyklon B right now. That's my guess. I want to know, so if the disease is on the wane in China, if the tides turned and less people are getting sick, I think it was just natural. You know, I think this is just the course that the flu takes. I want to know if any of these things that the Chinese government was doing had any effect on containing it, because I'm guessing the quarantine has helped a lot, and that could be the reason why it's gone down. As soon as they let people back to work and out on the street, who knows? It could kick back in. People could get it again. I think that though things like the masks and the suits and the spraying the Zyklon B in the streets, that kind of thing, it probably doesn't do anything, would be my guess. And even quarantining people, does that really help if there are people dying in like the apartment next to you and they like spit up all their last diseased breath into the air and it floats through your air conditioning and stuff? I got a comment in my live chat about this flower border. The flower border is aesthetic. I mean, it is what it is, right? Like, this flower border, I designed it myself. And I designed this design like 5 years ago, probably. And I've had it sitting in my computer and have not used it until a month ago. I figured it out. This is what it's for. Do you know what was originally in here in the flower border? I was trying to meme. I was trying to become a meme magician. And I had a picture of Osama with a woman in a big rack right there. Not naked, but with a bra on. China Man is saying the Protestant church in my country super spread the virus. Well, I'm hearing it's a cult, but then at the same time, I'm hearing it's a really, really big one too. That there's like this guy on True News was talking about it too. He even said like, oh, my girlfriend's brother's in the Korean army and he's in that church. Like, so I'm thinking there could be like a military element, religiously fanatical element. They could have went to Wuhan and stole the virus from there. And that's why they spread it to Iran and to Italy, because those are both homelands of like, I guess what they would see as, I don't know, religion, antithetical religion perhaps to their religion. But then why would they spread it to themselves? I don't think there is such a thing as a bioweapon. I think it's all a bunch of air. And I don't think there's such a thing as a virus even. So I kind of doubt the whole thing. Like I'm saying, I don't think there's a bioweapon you can take. Like I can take a cigarette and you can spread it around the world and be having people dying from it. I don't think that's the nature of disease. I think disease comes from like a huge number of influencers, and there's a limit to like what a bioweapon would be. I mean, why? How could you keep something that like that alive if it's a disease that goes between people and kills people? How could you keep something like that separate from people? You know, I'm saying it only exists within like the human organism. And I don't think that they can extract it and then put it back into a human. I could be wrong. You know, they say they can do these things. They claim they can do these things. Maybe they can do something similar to it, but I don't think they have effective bioweapons, because I'm sure if there were, they would have been used a long time ago. They would have already been, ethnically wiping out whatever group for the last, 30 years. So I don't think they really have them. And I don't think they have them because I don't think they have viruses. I'm anti-vaccine. I'm anti-medicine. The medicine industry here in America is just, it's awful. It's like Satan came up from hell and figured out a way to make the humans like sell themselves to him and worship him. And that's through drug dependency. And I've seen drug dependency, tobacco, I guess, is apparently a drug too, right? And I'm kind of dependent on it. I don't want to quit it, right? But the thing is, tobacco has been growing here naturally for like forever, right? And the first people that lived here used it, and they've been living here for thousands of years, and they're still using it, okay? I'm talking about the pharmaceutical drugs created by the medical industry have turned people into like drugged out zombies here. In the United States, it's so much worse than anywhere I've been to. And I'm talking about, I've been to Mexico and South America and wherever where they have like crack in the street. There's a few crazy people. They do that. They have weed, but they don't have these drugs are worse that we have in America that come from the pharmaceutical companies. They're 1,000 times more addicting, 1,000 times more powerful. Once someone takes them, they never can live again. They can never put anything back into their life other than getting more of the pharmaceutical drugs. That's it. And so I do not trust anything that the doctors say, especially about viruses and vaccines. I mean, vaccines are like, they're like dried up, like, bacteria or something from like infected tissue or something, that like using like an egg or something, an egg yolk, and they infect it with like something raucous or something putrid, and then they inject people with it, and somehow it keeps them from getting ill. And then you try to talk to people about this, and they're like, well, you're clearly an idiot and retarded. And like, are you like a medical historian or something? Do you know about like these illnesses that they claim vaccines cured? Do you know like what the nature of those illnesses were? Do you know if they were epidemics or if they were always around and they were only wiped out from vaccines or whatnot? Or could there have been another factor like modern plumbing and modern sanitation that was the actual results in the decline of those diseases? You know, I think virus is it's just a word for an idea. They say, oh, there's pictures of it now, and you can see like the pictures of it, and those are artist renditions. There's no such thing as a picture of a virus. It's like the pictures they have of like the galaxies and black holes and stuff. Those are all scientists, and they have theories, man. And they're telling you, according to our theory, it should look like this. And then they have all the media publishing them and saying, this is it. And you know what? The media is lying to you like they lie about everything else. You know, it's just a lie. It's not, there's nothing like that exists. It's a picture. It's like a cartoon. It's a virus cartoon. It's just the flu, man. I'm telling you, the Wuhan flu is a flu. And it's really bad because it has this thing called pneumonia with it, right? Pneumonia is where your lungs fill up with water. And so a lot of people are getting ill and dying from it. Good evening, Thomas Red. I've been watching all the videos about the Wuhan Wu flu on YouTube, and I've seen everything. According to China, people aren't getting sick as much, but the measures that the Chinese took to quarantine people were extreme. And I saw a video yesterday of a woman jump out of a window in an apartment building and climb down like a gutter and just start running in circles in the street that's totally empty. And she was screaming her head off. Wah! Wah! So the question is the quarantine the reason why the people aren't getting sick anymore? Will the virus, well, I shouldn't even use that word since I just said I don't believe in the viruses, but will the illness return once the people come back into, contact with each other? Because everyone in China has been isolated, especially Wuhan, but even all their major cities, people are in quarantine. In fact, we have thousands of people in quarantine in the USA right now who've been exposed to this flu. Will it spread in the United States? I think we have about 3 weeks before we'll know for sure. But the real numbers, too, aren't even known. They're not reporting it. I've heard they've had some people get sick, possibly die of this flu in the United States, in California and New York, exactly where you'd expect it to start, right? With all the Chinese people. And that the government has been hiding it. Like that someone posted something from like, they're like, oh, they're a nurse or something at a hospital in New York City, and someone had died of some disease that looked like it was a flu with pneumonia. And they were deleted the post or something, and someone saw that, and people started, it's the whispers of COVID-19, right? Like everyone said, oh yeah, this happened, but they deleted it. And I'm not too worried about it though, because like I said, I'm a skeptic of the idea of viruses, and I think the nature of the illness is tied to the geography. It's tied to the like the air and the climate in China, and it's tied to the people in China. So like their genetics and their diets and that kind of thing. And though you can see cases will get outside of China, it won't be at the same levels of like infection, because the illness was created for, you know, the conditions in China. Everything from the people to the air and the geography is what I'm saying. And so when it gets outside of China, it becomes less and less powerful. Thomas says, what about Japan? My son lives there. No, I think Japan's far enough away too. And it's close enough too that if it was really like some horrible thing, like you would think that they would already be having a lot of cases starting to pop up in Japan, which they have not. They have the cruise ship that came from China with lots of people infected. But as far as I know, there's been no report that those people have infected any Japanese people. So I don't know. Japan has had some issues. Okay. So actually that's even better news, because they've had some issues as like saying, yeah, they've kind of had a brush with it, but it hasn't exploded there yet. It hasn't caught on, and it's been going on, you know, now for like over a month where they've had some issues, and it's not looking anything like it is in China. So, you know, I think Japan's safe. I think Korea's safe. I think the Koreans, all these Koreans that got it, were all connected to this cult, this church, that where they could have intentionally be spreading it, is what one of the theories is. I don't know if they're intentionally spreading it. I listened to this one guy. He's Brazilian. He's talking every day. He does like probably 4 hours of live streaming talking about the coronavirus, and he's saying like it's going to infect the whole world and 100 million people are going to die and stuff. But he does find some videos I never saw, and he does say some things that are kind of true. Like there's a lot of things we don't know about what China did to contain the illness. And one thing is, there's a lot of doctors and nurses and police that were infected by it, and they couldn't really do anything to prevent the disease going to the people that were supposed to treat the sick people. And so that's one of the frightening things about the outbreak of it, you know. It's like really, I think the Chinese probably did a pretty good job. I mean, they're probably like just on the brink of like some sort of national meltdown now, and they just survived it. And imagine if like Bloomberg wins the presidency, China's going to come back and just like buy the United States. I mean, Bloomberg will sell the US. That's another thing too I kind of wanted to talk about, like, you know, the Democrats and the presidential race. It's kind of interesting to watch these, you know, alt-right, dissident right people on here. They're all saying, you know, we're going to support Bloomberg over Trump, because as bad as Trump is being like a puppet to Israel, like Bloomberg's an even more evil, not even a puppet, you know, like Bloomberg's the guy pulling the strings on Trump. And we want to have the actual, like, you know, villain in the cape sitting in the office, because these people, you know, they're like saying, oh, we want a whole new form of government, a whole new constitution. And so they want the worst guy possible to get elected. So it's kind of like this ironic, like, backing of Bloomberg. Thomas says, I think they're overreacting. He's talking about the Wuhan flu. Yeah, I'm saying it's just the flu. It's just the flu. And that gym guy, on YouTube, he's always talking about that, like, ironically, he's saying it's just the flu for like the last, 3 weeks. He's been doing a lot of really funny shows. He's made a lot of jokes at the expense of the Chinese and that kind of thing. It's been entertaining, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's just the flu, right? I highly doubt there's anyone who's going to watch my show who's going to vote for Michael Bloomberg. But the funny thing about it is, like I said, I watched the debate and he got like roasted. I mean, because he has like sexual allegation lawsuits against him or something. And the thing is, there's no Democrat people that ever watch that debate or think for themselves or anything, They're going to vote for who's ever on the ballot who has the D next to their name. And so it could be Bloomberg. And I bet Bernie wins again. He gets all the popular support from the activist liberals, the activist leftists, the wannabe commies. And then he goes to the DNC, and then they give it to Bloomberg on the super delegates. Thomas said, do you know Owen Benjamin? I don't know Owen Benjamin. I mean, he had a YouTube channel. Does he still have it? I watched it one time, and I liked it. But it was like his best show ever somehow. Somehow the only time I watched him, I think it was his best show. And all the other ones I watched for like 2 minutes or 1 minute. It wasn't as good. But I watched him one time. It was like he was outside. He lives in like the middle of nowhere. Or not the middle of nowhere, but somewhere in the countryside or something. Not a city. The sun's setting behind him. And he's like, I'm sick of all the Jews that control our media and are programming people what they should think and what they should say just to match their Jewish agenda. It is completely anti-Christian. And these people, they act against themselves. They don't know what they're doing because they buy up all the Jewish lies. And like, I thought, hey, this is on YouTube. That's pretty cool. I didn't know you could say that kind of thing. But I think he might have got kicked off YouTube. I shouldn't try to take after him. I've already got a couple strikes before, and I don't know how long it takes to get them to go away. I don't think they ever go away. I think I got them. I think they went away though before when they changed like the terms of service or something. So if you had like strikes on your channel before they changed the terms of service, it like reversed it. Because I'm thinking I'm only at 1 right now, and I know I had one before. I had one before, like in August. Oh, yeah. Plato Zodiac says there's 2 here in Top Chat, and it says 1. Yeah, you know what? The whole time on my thing, I'm seeing 0 views. I'm seeing 0 views here. And I don't know if that's YouTube or what. I'm on StreamYards, so I was thinking it's StreamYards doesn't have a good like connection with the YouTube server or something. And so I'm only seeing 0 when I got maybe 2 or 3 people. Yeah, I don't care about Owen Benjamin. Like I said, I watched that one episode, though that was pretty cool one time. But then I subscribed at that point. I'd never heard of him or seen him before. I don't know how I found him. And maybe it was recommended to me by YouTube. And then he came back with some other videos, and he was like playing a piano. And then I like Wikipedia'd him, and turns out he was like some sitcom actor or something. And I thought to myself, well, man, this guy just doesn't like Jewish people because he like lived in Hollywood or something and wanted to be the next Brad Pitt, and now he's bitter. So I don't care, I mean, Owen Benjamin, is he still on YouTube? I guess that's the only thing I'm really wondering that you could tell me. Or did he get kicked off? Nick Fuentes got kicked off. And JF claimed credit for that. That was funny because I don't think JF got him kicked off. I mean, I think that YouTube's been going down the list. They started with Alex Jones, and they haven't wanted to create like a big backlash. So they're going after people that are, you know, who aren't being explicit, like doing something, like saying something like, you know, using the N-word and talking about violence or something. They're going after the people who are very political, but very, you know, anti-establishment, right? Very radical in their politics. And they're starting with the biggest ones, and they're slowly going down to the smaller channels. And I don't think JF had anything to do with this. Obviously, he claims he did. And there are other streamers who are saying, oh, he did have something to do with it. YouTube auto-subbed you to this channel? That's cool. I don't think so. I don't know. Too condescending. Oh, yeah, you know what? Like, I feel like he's like one of these people you see on here sometimes. I've seen a few that are like this. Like, they like to show off what they have, right? And like I've seen whole YouTube channels, like especially watching like Brazilians that live in the United States. Every Brazilian in the United States has like their own YouTube channel where it's like some woman in her 40s, you know, who's married to some mid-manager in some corporation, and she's going out once a week and like buying like a bunch of Nikes and stuff, and they show it, and this is their whole channel. What did I buy today? And I've seen a few of those. And not just Brazilians, but I mean, Owen Benjamin, he's like that. Like, look I'm like a survivalist. I have this, you know, little farm. I have a goat and stuff. And I'm going to show like my nice wife, my nice home, that kind of thing. And it seems like so much of their channel is just about showing off their property. It's weird. I honestly wish like you could not see the room that I have behind me, and I had some sort of like, you know, screen or something with like a, I don't know, some sort of backdrop to make me look like a professional, right? But yeah, this cabinet I have is pretty nice over here. That cabinet, I fixed it myself. It's old, and when I got it, the windows had no glass, or they did, but they were cracked, and I took it out. I got a sheet of glass, and see how they have those arches on the top? I got a glass cutter, and you can't like cut the arch and just like draw it like a line and break it. You have to kind of take off little pieces at a time and make it fit. And I got the glass to fit in the window. About the YouTube strikes, you can, yeah, I know there's a way to get it removed. I mean, there's a button on the thing, on the panel in the YouTube section where they show you the strike. Right there, you can click on something and they'll give you the information or the contact to appeal it. I didn't do that. I'm not worried about it. But I know one person who's talked about on their stream, having their stream almost deleted and going to YouTube headquarters in Ireland, is that Ryan Dawson guy. And I guess he did that. It sounds like he appealed to not get his channel removed, and so he still has it. I know they must watch him very closely, and they probably will remove him again in the future, would be my guess. And they have to, because, you know, he comes in there saying like, oh, I have a lawyer and I don't want you to remove my channel and I didn't violate your policy. They're probably like making a case against him, how they can remove it. I never watch his stuff really that much. I mean, I've seen a couple of his streams before. He's kind of lame. He's really like, he's really, I don't know what his political stance is. He's one of these like liberal lefties that are like anti-Israel, right? I mean, Who are these people? Like this guy, Ryan Dawson, he could probably be Ilhan Omar's friend, right? Like they're totally like pro whatever, pro drugs, pro gay, like anti-racist or whatever, but they will go on and on about how, you know, America's run by Jews. I mean, I totally agree with that. Yeah, sure. Sure, America's run by Jews, but like, yeah, I mean, that's also too why there's all these other things too, like why there's drugs, why there's gays, you know, what's going on with everything. You know, it's all connected. You can't be like a liberal lefty and be anti-Zionist in my mind. I hope this video doesn't get deleted. I really made a good point there. You know, I think Ilhan Omar is a good bridge for people who are learning about conservative values now. Am I wrong? Thomas says porn. Yeah, that's another thing too. But that just goes in with the gay thing. Since all porn is gay, unless you're watching only lesbian porn. Owen Benjamin's a small-time failed actor. I'm getting some good comments here. So you guys watched Owen Benjamin for a while. Was he always like, was he always so divisive? I feel like when I watched him, like I just caught him at a point where he was like breaking. Like he was kind of really, you know, really going downhill fast. And his channel was probably something else before, because there were like 300,000 people watching his live stream, and he's talking about the media in Hollywood being controlled by Jewish people, which is something everyone knows about, you know, and we don't really need to talk about it. But I mean, I wouldn't think, like, I always end up ranting like this, and I never get beyond, like, you know, sometimes I've had 10 or 20 people listening to me, right? That's the most. So I don't think he could have got 300,000 views going on about that. And I think he must have just gone downhill. I don't know. And I'm not like, I don't like, you know, I want to say, I don't want to promote hate or violence or anything. And I have nothing against Jewish people as far as they have the right to their religion, right? They're Jewish people in Europe for all of recorded history. And they can follow their religion, right? And then I'll like look to the Christian church for my moral values. They should not have a say in the government, in morality and that kind of thing. They shouldn't be producing media. I just don't like the way that when you look at things like power structures, that it seems to be dominated by this antichrist thought. And where does that come from? That is what I'm upset about. As far as I've said before, I think the banks are running the government, right? And their banks are like run by Jewish people. Now, Jews have always been involved in banking. But the thing was, in the Middle Ages, you had the king, and then you had the Jew in charge of his gold, right? And he would manage the money. And the thing was, the king could say to if he wasn't being appeased by his subjects, including Christians and Jews, he could take from them, right? So he could just take back all those assets from the bankers. And right now, we're in a situation where the government is under the control of the bankers. It used to be that the government controlled the banks. And so I have no problem with Jewish bankers if there's some regulation on it. And there's no regulation. We live in the libertarian nightmare right now. And it's just what you can buy, you can get away with. And Epstein shows this. Oh, Thomas remembers that stream I did about sodomy and does it include oral sex or not? No, I haven't learned anything more about that. I mean, what I think what it was there are laws in the United States that had definitions of sodomy, and they said oral sex was in that definition. And does it go back further than that too? Yes, it goes back to ancient Rome. They had it. Oral sex was considered to be something that prostitutes did, and that it was something that the high class women, right, they didn't do. And I heard this talking to people on YouTube, and I already talked about this before. I don't know if those streams are still up. I think they are. The one where I talked with Claire Cobb about it is. And as far as researching it myself, I haven't done anything like that. You know, I've been single forever, man. I don't, you know, and so it's easy for me to kind of like pontificate from this vantage point. Yeah. So, you know, I'm just thinking like, I don't know. I'm thinking oral sex is sodomy, same thing. It's bad. Don't do it, right? I don't know. It'll be a hard thing for people to understand. I mean, do you need it, right? But the thing is, I feel like I don't need sex. You know, I don't need any sex at all. So it's hard. I guess I can, you know, I get kind of the way that the Pope said that ridiculous thing about the gays, like, who am I to judge? Because like he's supposed to be celibate, even though who knows, he's probably involved with their whole little, some sort of gay cult in the church or something. I don't know. But certainly there's some gross aspect to it, you know? Like, if I really love this woman, like, you know, okay, like here, this girl in her little, how do I point that way? This is so hard. I have to like, I can't like move and point at stuff on my screen, like on this background and stuff or foreground, because the direction I want to point it at, it's like a mirror, right? And so I actually end up moving the opposite way. So that rainbow woman who holds a sign that says Allah loves diversity, if I fell in love with her, you know, would I like want to kiss her? Maybe a little, but I don't think I would want to like have her sticking her tongue in my mouth and that kind of thing. It'd be gross, you know, and then imagine doing all these weird sexual things and then being in love still and like going to kiss her. Like, it'd be like I was kissing a goat, right? But yeah, this stream's dedicated to these Muslim women that are totally in love with the rainbow flag and the gays, you know. I don't think it's fair, you know, that they don't love me because I'm not having sex with women, but I'm not having sex with men, so I'm not exactly in your camp, but I'm pretty close. I mean, I feel like I'm as alienated and woman hating as any gay could be, right? From women. The Bible mentions oral sex in the Song of Solomon. I don't know about that. That's an interpretation of a poetic script, you know? I don't know what's it say, like the exact words, right? It's not, it doesn't say. No, I'm not using an Apple. I'm using a regular Azus, right? I would have to see that Song of Solomon verse. I'm afraid to read the Bible, honestly. I quit reading my Bible because I figured that it's better just to pray, and that there's a lot of stuff in the Bible too I could clearly tell that wasn't true, and that it had been edited, and I didn't want to get stuck in it, like focusing on that kind of thing. And I also thought too, what about the stuff that is true too? I would rather not know about like things like Judgment Day or something, right? It's just like ignorance is bliss on that kind of thing. And you know, but I don't want to say like I have no knowledge. Yeah, like, you know, there's that one verse where it talks about, it says some of Jesus's apostles were teaching this woman, and she was a Gentile. And then Jesus said, no, you can't teach the Gentiles, because that's like throwing like your, I don't know, pearls before swine or something. I don't know if that's where that came from. But then, so that's like horrible, because the whole point of the New Testament is saying that, you know, the Jews are the people who reject Jesus, and now, you know, God is like there for anyone who receives him, right? But so then the next part in that gospel, where it's talking about the woman that Jesus told the apostles not to minister to, it says, then the woman said to Jesus, I know what Jesus said, don't throw your scraps or something, you know, to the Gentiles. And then the woman said, even the dogs eat the scraps from the master's table. And this is just a weak statement. I mean, it's just saying like, hey, you know, I can be a dog and I can still take what I can get from this, right? And get a little bit from it. It's just clearly edited, you know, like they just passed this manuscript around, and somehow this one part got in there, and then someone added onto it to make it seem like it was less divisive between Jews and Gentiles and that kind of thing. And it was probably a Jew in the first place that wrote the part about don't minister to the Gentiles. I mean, for sure it was. It couldn't have been a Christian who wrote that. It wasn't the gospel writer who wrote that. And the thing is, though, the early church people, they didn't all understand it, and it got canonized and stuff. And there's just clearly, you know, parts of it that don't all mesh together. And so it's just kind of pointless to study it all the time. Like, the only inspiration from God that someone can get is from a text? No. I mean, there's like a Holy Spirit that constantly is enacting God's will upon every living being at all times. Plato said, what's your belief system? See, and this is a disappointing part, because like I'm saying, like, I believe in God, like, and that's it. Like, I don't get much deeper than that. I'm not going to go deep into theology, because there's not, it's not like I never read anything about it, but it's not the point. You know, God is guiding me to the future. I want to know what the will of God is. But how can I know that? I just have to assume everything that happens is the will of God. So I'm not in like a church or in a denomination or whatnot. I guess I was baptized in the Catholic Church. I'm a non-practicing Catholic. But I swear all Catholics are non-practicing. And a practicing Catholic would be like the last person in the world that you'd ever want to meet or trust. I mean, what is it? It's just like a giant like cult of perverts. But I still believe in God, and I think that if you look at the history of the church, it's very great, and it built the world to where it is today. And I'm not like into evangelicalism, right? Maybe I should try it. Maybe I need to find someone who can make me a born again. That's probably a better option. Thomas said 5 major books have been removed. Enoch explains a lot. I'm going to tell you something. Those books were not removed. Thomas, the book of Enoch was not removed from the Bible. It was never in the Bible. There might be some other ones that were, like the Gospel of Mary or something. There's that. The Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas was removed for sure. But Enoch wasn't. Enoch came from Ethiopia. They had the Ethiopian Bible, and they had the book of Enoch in it. And it was written in Ethiopia or somewhere in a Coptic Christian church. It was never like widely spread. It wasn't like it was removed from the Bible. It's like they never got it. Like it could be a real book. It could be legitimate. I don't know that much about it to go into the authenticity of it. But what I'm saying is it never got into the manuscripts that like the Greeks had. I don't think. That's what I'm trying to say. But there could be some other ones that the Greeks did have, though, that they did remove for sure. Yeah, Catholic Bible has the Apocrypha. And the thing about the Apocrypha is, okay, here's something I do want to talk about religion that I do feel very passionate about, that I really like to explain. The Apocrypha is books that were written in ancient Greek, but they were Jewish, right? So they were Jewish Greek people, and they wrote these books. And so the Jews reject it, right? And I guess you wouldn't even call them Jewish. They were Hebrew, right? They were people they were Israel people, like living in Greece, writing in Greek, and they wrote these books. And so they happen in between the time of the Old Testament written in Hebrew and the New Testament written in Greek. And so you say, oh, the New Testament's written by Christians in Greek. Old Testament's written by Jews in Hebrew letters. Where's the link? There's no link. And that's the thing, because no one knows about the Apocrypha. That's the total link right there, that there's Jews writing in Greek. And then that's how you get to the Christians writing in Greek. And those books are pretty good too. They're not that bad. They're narrative stories. So they're like kind of like that what's the book? The book of oh, I'm forgetting it. I don't know, that story about Mordecai in Babylon and stuff, and there's like a king, and he wants to be with like the daughter of this rabbi, and then he wants to kill all the Jews and stuff. And what book is that? You know what I'm talking about? But it's like a story like that, like some Jewish story, and that's what the Apocrypha are. Yeah, it could be Maccabees. No, that's not Maccabees. I'm talking about one that's in the Old Testament. Maccabees is apocryphal. I can't say that word. Apocryphic. One big thing too, like when I look at the Bible too, like I look at it I don't just think Old Testament, New Testament. I look at the style of the writings. In the Old Testament, there's distinct parts, right? There's like the Pentateuch, the books of Moses, and then there's like sort of like histories talking about Judges and David and Solomon, and then you get into the poetic stuff, then you get into prophetic stuff, and then there's this area where the poetry and the prophecies combine together, and you get the books like Isaiah. Isaiah is like probably the most beautiful kind of writing that exists in the Bible. And it's really a lot like the Quran too. And it's like this poetic prophecy style. And I think that's really interesting to read. And it's really bizarre and it's very artful too. And, you know, to say it's not literature and to say like, oh, the Odyssey is better than like the book of Isaiah in literary value, which some people on the far right do, is like they've never read like this style of writing. They've never read the ancient Greek Odyssey, and they've never read the book of Isaiah or studied it. I mean, the Odyssey is pretty dry as far as the writing style goes. There's definitely aspects to it, like the way that the plot is, the way that the story goes, and the events that happen. I mean, that make it very good at like developing like how you tell a story. That doesn't exist in the book of Isaiah, but the actual like just line by line, the language is very, very good in the Bible. Now, the New Testament's also totally different. The Gospels, of course, are just storytelling, basic, right? And you could apply that to any tradition and say, well, they're just as powerful. But the New Testament, the letters are interesting because these are correspondences. And that's interesting that you have a holy book of correspondence between people. And in these correspondences, they're talking only about ideas. They're not talking about much in the physical realm. So it's pretty interesting. Thomas says the doctrine of purgatory is in Maccabees. Yeah, purgatory is a religious concept that's shared by Christians and Muslims. Both say, you know, there are people that were bad in religion, but they weren't so bad, or they could have been ignorant too, and that after a certain amount of punishment, they will have eternal rest. Out on the wire in the chat, I never saw you here before. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for watching. What do you think of the announcement from the Vatican that they're opening their records about the Nazi movement? I mean, I don't know if that's true or what. I never heard anything about that. I don't know what their records would exactly say. I mean, I guess they could have. Are you talking about their involvement with German National Socialism, or are you talking about their involvement with fascism in Spain, all over, anywhere? Because Nazi gets thrown around a lot today. It's kind of a coverall term. I don't know what you're saying. Are you saying that they're talking about their involvement with the Germans during that period, or? I don't know. From what I understand is that the Catholics have never really been big against the Nazis, because obviously they don't want to have Jewish power. Obviously they would have different ideas about how to, you know, manage things in the world, but I don't think they're like opposing forces there. A0 Infinity. So Plato thinks that the Vatican and the Freemasons and Hitler all agreed to worship the devil. Luciferianism. I don't know. See, I don't think there's like a way to worship the devil. I think the devil comes into the world and like possesses people, and like he'll bring them together and create like these horrible disasters. And certainly the Nazis were a horrible disaster, and I don't want to see Nazis in the future and that kind of thing. But were they actually consciously motivated to like create like this system of evil? No, I think they were trying to do good. I think they were trying to do what was good for Germany, and it didn't balance out against what was happening with the rest of the world. The Vatican has long been criticized about their involvement with Germany and the Nazi movement. Well, there's got to be a way to like take the blame, off of religious people without connecting them to like things like this idea, like we would want like violence and war and stuff to happen because of Jewish people. Like religious people, they want Jewish people to follow Christ. They want to convert people. I think Catholics, though they're anti-Jewish, they care more about converting Jewish people like than anything. Like they would rather convert a Jewish person than an African or an Asian person. Lucifer is a god of both sides, says Plato. No, Lucifer is not a god of both sides, but Lucifer is a creation of God. So he cannot supersede God. He comes after God. He might be powerful. He might be the second to God, right? So he's not really both sides, though. It's really that sometimes, this is bad things happen in the world, and it could have been out of some sort of evil inspiration, but in that there's always a teaching where some good comes from it. This is what we've known forever. Love for money, power, and this world system. Only the high degree Freemasons include Satan. I read a book, and I don't know exactly what the Freemasons are, but like one time I was in a bookstore and I flipped open this book and I found it. It was like an old book, the 19th century. And it was about Freemasons, and I just looked at like a couple pages, and it was talking about like there was a list of something, and it was like the degrees of Masonry, and it was the 33-degree wizard or something. And I thought like, hey, this reminds me of what I heard about the KKK. Like the Ku Klux Klan were Masons, and I read this other book, and it was about Druids and ancient pagans in England. And this guy, he said that the Masons were the continuation of paganism in the West in opposition to Christianity. So Masonry is antichrist, and it's very Jewish, right? And the Catholic Church has opposed Masonry more than any other group. And to say that Catholics and Masons are working together to control the world is a misunderstanding, because Freemasons are antichrist. Now, is the Catholic Church antichrist too? I guess evangelical Christians like the English Church would say yes. They would say that everyone is antichrist except for them. But I believe that Catholic means universal, and that whatever happens, God decides it happens to me, whatever I know, it will happen to the same to someone on the other side of the world that doesn't know what I know. It's Catholic. Yeah, Zero's right. The Jews and Druids, same thing. Who's Albert Pike? 33-degree Freemason. I want to know who's Aleister Crowley. I always listen to that YouTube streamer, Brutus the British, talking about like masonry or witchcraft and whatnot. And he's always referencing like, oh, I learned from Aleister Crowley. What are Anastasi Jew? You're talking about the whole Khazarian kingdom thing and the Germanic Jews, right? The Russian Jews, German, Russian, whatever. They're like they're Jews. I'm not going to say they're not real Jews because you don't even, okay, you've heard of the Hebrew Israelites, these black people in America saying they're God's chosen people and they're fake Jews out there. Like in the Bible, in the Old Testament, they don't have the word Jew. There's no Jew. You don't get Jew until the New Testament because Jews are people that were rejecting Jesus. That's what set them apart. There was a group, a tribe in Russia that took up Judaism. Like this is long after Jesus. This is like something like the 8th century, and it was when Islam and Christianity were both spreading. And these Russians, they wanted, to oppose these other groups, and they knew the other groups, the Christians and the Christian religion and the Muslim religion, also included the God of Israel too. And so they knew that those religions came from the religion of the people of Israel from those ancient times. And so they became Jews because they thought they're going to the source or something. They didn't know about like the New Testament. They weren't Christian that converted to Jews. They were Khazarians, and there's this book about it. I've never read the book. I want to get the book. And they became like the biggest group of Jews. And they're European, right? And they're white. And that's the thing too. They're Jews for sure. They totally are Antichrist. And that's what I don't trust about the whole, thing about like white power, the 14 words and white babies. Like if I have a baby that is not like believing in God and is a Jew, like, well, they're not genetically Jewish. They're not linked to the tribe, right? But they'll completely be controlled by them if they don't have any religion. And so I think, religion is the way to rebase the West in itself. But the Khazarians spread. They spread into Russia. They eventually spread into Poland and Germany. And now in Israel today, most people, like more than 50%, their ancestry is Russian, right? So they're all like these Russian people. And the people that were actually like genetically the Middle Eastern like people during the time of the Bible or Moses, I mean, those people are largely Muslim. And maybe there were a lot of Jews who converted to Islam back in the day. One thing funny too about conversion between religions, sometimes you hear about Muslims being in Spain, and the thing is Muslims don't have any sort of idea about history or education and stuff. So what they don't realize is that there were a lot of Christians that became Muslim. So they think that, oh, these Muslims were tricked into being Christians. In Spain, they went from following the Christian religion to the Muslim religion and back to the Christian religion. This has happened in more than one country. There's never been a country that went from the Christian religion to the Muslim religion to the Christian religion and back again to the Muslim religion. But it's gone the other way around. Do you get what I'm saying? Because all Islam is a copy of Christianity, that it just tries to copy like this idea of like religiosity, but there's no belief in God in it. And there's so much like it's just playing into like the passion of like belief too, like my religion's great. And what can they feed off each other. It's like a colony of like fire ants trying to bite people's feet, you know? Like they're too passionate. They don't have like regular marriage, you know? They have like 4 wives and they're talking about like they marry like little girls and stuff. It's awful. They're not like a really, I don't know why. I can understand like how maybe a culture could go to being Islamic from Christian and then back to Christian, you know, but then once they had a taste of it, they'll never go back to the Islam. And Spain, look at Europe and look at the numbers too. Like, where are all the immigrants and whatnot that are Muslim? They're not in Spain. Why is that? It's because the Spanish people don't like them, and they're all descended from a little bit some people that were. I missed some good chats here, I think. There's some sort of conversation going on in the chat about Lucifer. Oh, I like this Zero Infinity thing. He says that Germanic Jews were Druids. Thank you, says Zero Infinity. You validated my point. Yeah, his point is he's just saying that we can't identify as white people. Like, by identifying as white people, we're actually reducing ourselves into like this category, like that takes away our who we are. You know, we're like really, you know, you can say, look at the way that black people have been pushed to the side in America, right? Like, yeah, they have that label of being Negro. And what is it in the interest of whites to develop a similar system for them? And so who's at the top? It's not going to be white people, no. Well, it will be white people, but they're not going to be a people that have any faith. There'll be a people run by the synagogue, right? Chosen gifts and callings are still in place, and they're paganish atheists. I don't know what the gifts and callings are. Okay, so this leads me on to say something about paganism and the Christian religion. And since I'm talking about European ethnicity and that kind of thing, I did this last stream, and I don't think most of you watching right now, I have 6 live viewers. Probably none of you watched my last stream where I talked about it. Just a simple thing, explaining religion and history and the intersection of paganism and Christianity. So really ancient construction was found in like the northern part of the British Isles, like those rune stones. And they also had something called, I forget the name of them, but they have like these stone houses where they're building like little forts out of stones that go back like really a long time ago. Like, these are the oldest constructions known. And there's also the ancient Greeks wrote a lot about these people called Hyperboreans who came from a northern Atlantic isle, so England, right? And that these were the people that kind of brought civilization to the world. And you see in ancient findings like ironworking. They have ironworking in like the Shetland Islands in the middle of nowhere in the Atlantic from the northern British culture. And you find all that technology they have there, it was developed there. These were the original people who developed things like masonry, ironworking, and stuff. They're all British. And if you look at the ancient finds, they also appear then in like Phoenicia, which was ancient Israel, around the same dates. And so you had these seafaring people coming from the north, and these are the people, they became pharaohs. They built the pyramids. They were like the original people, right? And we can be very proud of this. And were they pagan? Yeah, they were pagan back then. But they tried things, right? And so what my belief is that the apostles of Christ came to them and it fitted them. Like they tried it. Like they followed that God, and that God spoke to who they already were. And it makes sense. You know, we can all agree with a lot of things about a belief in one God, that there's a lot of good in it, you know, to give people faith when they have none or something. That it's not like, what I'm trying to say is that believing in God doesn't contradict anything in tradition that is outside of like what history says about the church or Christianity. That's all I'm trying to say. And so I don't think there needs to be an opposition between paganism and Christianity. And there's not really that much known about paganism. As little as we can understand the beginning of Christianity, there's almost nothing we can understand about paganism, only that we can understand that our non-Christian ancestors took up Christianity. So how are they different? How are they even different? That's what I'm saying. That there's always God. God has always been there, guiding the people. And though they didn't have writing, maybe they didn't invent books and writing. That's one thing they didn't necessarily do, or they did, but they only did it after they were in another country. You know, they only did it after the culture developed somewhere else, and then it went back to England. So I'm saying that the Hyperboreans were English or whatever. 5,000 years ago, they came down. Then they came back. There's always been a back and forth, right? And I'm not trying to be all like multicultural here. What we have today, there's a one-way invasion from the global south that's totally destroying European culture in Europe. I'm saying 1,000 years ago, it was probably mostly the other way around. There were northern invasions. Now it's a southern invasion. And it's not even like it was necessarily an invasion, though, thousands of years ago. It was just people moving. There was so much land. There were so many resources. Now we have overpopulation. That's why it's not even like the South is trying to invade the North out of malice. It's like they need to for resources. And this is what leads to war. Yeah. Someone says they have pagan friends and they're like feminist. Man, what I was talking about was like historical paganism. Like there was a time when there were like European people and they didn't have the Bible. That we know that's true. That's what I was talking about. I'm not talking about, so I'm talking about when someone who's antichrist today comes and tries to argue against Christianity is what I'm talking about, and saying that they can characterize the attitudes of our ancestors towards an antichrist attitude when we know that they received the gospel. I mean, this is the word. English is a corruption of this Arabic or whatever for Injil. And we also have the word angel too. And it comes to English. It's like these people who are ancestors were totally receptive to religion. And so when I'm talking about paganism, I'm talking about the Antichrist people today that come and argue and make some sort of historical argument without really thinking about, like, what if I was alive back then? What was really going on? You know, they'll tell you, like, oh, everyone was burned at the stake or something, make something up, you know, like the Inquisition, my Inquisition, you know? I read about the Inquisition. Anyone could get out of the Inquisition. The only people the Inquisition destroyed were the enemies of the church, people that wanted to destroy the church. They were people that were pirates, like English pirates that stole Spanish gold and just hated the Spanish so much. Like, this was a guy who his friend was killed by a Spanish guy in a pirate raid and stuff, and he got captured and brought to a dungeon in the Inquisition, and he's never going to even give any favor to a Spanish person, that kind of thing. I mean, people today that call themselves pagans, like, what are they basing that off of? Like, what is their practice? What is their teachings coming from? Like, they're just making it up in their minds. It's all just, they're totally imagining it. You say they repeat what they're told, and they know more about their belief system than they do. You know more about their belief system. They just repeat what they're told. I'm surprised they're told anything at all. I mean, I'm surprised they're told. I think they make it up a lot. But I guess the people that tell them are making it up. And I'm not saying, like, nothing was ever made up before. The patriarchs or whatever, Abraham and Moses, they made up all that stuff too. But the thing is, time proved them to be correct, right? Like, their system, their traditions kind of worked. And then Jesus came along and turned the whole thing on its head, where their system no longer even needed to be in play. And now the whole world was going to believe in God. Yeah, heathenism is paganism. I just say it's Antichrist. Hey, after this rant, I'm thinking, like, I haven't seen any good EMJ videos on YouTube in a while. He's been on vacation or something. I got a comment on my last video from Claire Ka, and she said there's no basis for any law in the New Testament. Can you believe that? She's the one pushing for, like, Noahide laws or Sharia law and stuff. And she said there's no basis for any law in the New Testament. It shows these people's ignorance. We live in a country filled with foreigners that hate our way of life, and they hate our history, and they hate all the books that have been written. They want to burn all the books because there's a huge link between religion, the church, and the New Testament, and the very laws of our country, and the very people that wrote them, and how they wrote them, and how they came to those laws. Only today you cannot see it, because the veil of ignorance has been put over our faces. But why do we even say then it's the year 2020? Why don't we just call it the year zero? You know, and AOC is the empress of the world, right? No, the reason we call it 2020 is because it's 2020 years since Christ. That right there shows you there's got to be some sort of basis in our law, since the time is a law, right? I can't tell you right now is the year 1800 and I'm not lying, you're wrong, then I'd be lying. So that's a violation of a law right there. And these people, these foreigners, these Asiatics are so, I don't know, they're so obtuse. Like, they're so anti-Christ that they're going to say there's no basis for law in the New Testament. There's no basis for the old law in the New Testament. It does say that. But that doesn't mean there hasn't been 2,000 years of law that's come from it since. But that's what the leftists do. That's what the communists do. They destroy history. I think no, I can't remember the quote, but in the Marx, in his Communist Manifesto, he said something like history is the struggle between the worker and the owner or something, the slave and the master, and that the goal of communism would be to erase history because there's nothing important in history. The only thing that matters is that there are masters and slaves. In the future, everyone will be equal. That's the idea of communism. So they can look at things like you can have a cleric here who's looking at Judaism and Islam and saying, oh, the West needs Sharia law. The West needs Noahide laws because there's no basis for law in the Christian tradition, which is like, it's like you just totally closed your eyes to everything ever written in the last 2,000 years. But that's because of this leftism and this idea that there's no slave and no master. There's always a slave and a master. My master is God, you know. I'm a slave to God, and I'm an Abdullah, right? That's what the Muslims say. But luckily, I'm saved too by Jesus. So, well, I'm not really a born again, but maybe I should try it. I'm very I'm not very religious. I don't want to go to church or anything. I don't want to read my Bible. But I don't know. It's just like I feel like I'm very genuine though too. And like I can say, yeah, I'm Catholic technically, right? But I feel like I can't genuinely say like, oh, I was born again, you know. I feel like anyone can say they're Catholic. I feel like you can say you're Catholic even if you're like an African. I agree with EMJ or whatnot. I think an African in Africa right now could say I'm Catholic just on that basis. They're Catholic because they said it, because it's supposed to be for everyone. I don't believe they need a piece of paper or something. And I guess I don't know why you can't do that with being a born again, but I feel like I would have to get I feel like the ritual of baptism is something somewhat important to it. And I was already baptized Catholic. I don't know. I'm not worried about it. TJ says, are you a caveman? Hey, TJ is my girlfriend. I was waiting for her. It's the only reason I'm streaming today. I put up this picture of her right here. She's the Muslim girl that wears the rainbow flag. And yes, I'm a caveman. I agree. Here in America, we have a secret party called the Council on Un-American Activities. The left isn't communist. We're only taught that they are. What does this mean? What does this mean? This comment, you're freaking me out. You're talking about secret parties, secret police. Yeah, there's secret parties and secret police, but you're saying the left isn't really commies? I'm telling you, they're all commies and socialists, all these secret groups. That's where they got their whole game plan from the Russian Khazarians. TJ says, have you ever had a shave, man? I thought you liked the beard. I don't know. I feel like sometimes I shaved, but if I do shave, it would be like one time, and then I'll grow the beard out again. You know what's funny about my hair, though? Like, it's really long, right? No? Like, it just falls out all the time. My beard's so curly, and the hairs fall out all the time. I've never cut my hair for like years. And I think some people, if they never cut their hair for years, it would like get really big. Like, it would like go down to here, right? I never cut my hair or anything, and it's like it just kind of like keeps itself at this level by dropping out and growing back and stuff and curling, and it's weird. It's like I don't need to cut it or shave or nothing. It just stays in this level. I can't get long hair. I can't get a beard longer than this. I have no idea when the last time I ever cut my beard was. I cut the sides of it. I did cut the sides of it a little bit. I'll do that like once every like 2 months or something. I'll just trim it around the ears. That's it. And I'll trim my mustache. There are corrupt powers controlling everything we hear. Oh yeah, for sure. Like, so like in the olden days, like, they would communicate by yelling, and the people would yell, and they would like yell across the country. And they would shout to each other, and you could pass on news like the king is dead, the king is dead. And you could have that news travel across the entire country in a day or something, right? And now we're totally controlled. Like our whole population's brainwashed. There's no way that the critical news, like something about who's really in power and who's dead, if there's a transfer of power, you know, like if communists secretly took over, there's no way the people would know it, because you get someone out in the street and they shouted something like the British are coming today, you're just going to get, you know, shut up, probably arrested, you know, because this is the nature of the control. Oh, Plato has his own channel. He's talking about communist brainwashing. It might not be a bad idea to watch some of his movies or videos. I can't say anything I'm reading that he's writing appears to be too false. Yeah, he says it's a handful of people you never hear from. Of course, they're totally protected in their privacy, and they're setting the policies. And one thing, though, I would like to stress to you, though, is that they are antichrist. These aren't people who are in the church or who read a religious text, or they might be Jewish. They're Jewish for sure. And actually, they're antichrist. Their whole idea is to create a system that will eliminate belief in Christ. That's what actually you think they're driven by. This is where it gets scary, you know. And this is where I think, like, oh, maybe my channel could get deleted because it might sound like I'm being bitter or something. But like, their goal is not to get all the wealth in the world, all the money in the world. Their goal is to be antichrist and to destroy religion and believing in God. They don't want anyone to believe in God. That is actually their number one goal. And they want control. And how do you get control of all the world? If I say no one controls me, only God controls me, how can they ever control me? They can never control me. If there's no God, there's no freedom. And that's what they attack first and foremost. It's a spiritual battle. On that, you know, I feel like ending the show. I feel like that was the best point I made. Hey, John Vance, they're not redeemable, not able to link to a source. No, they've been trying to do this forever. They've at times we've been beaten down and there's been persecution. but there's never been a system of opposition that has been able to replicate itself. Yeah, you have to believe that. It's what I said. They want to kill religion in order to have total power and control, right? And TJ, I'll go back to answering your question. Have I ever had a shave? No, I really wanted to do a stream today, though, honestly, because I saw this really cute girl, and I don't know her, but I never talked to her, but I saw her a few times before by where I live. And I feel like, oh, she secretly likes me or something, because I saw her before and commenting on my comments on some other YouTube channel, right? And she made like a little profile and put her picture. And it's a kind of a small picture, but I thought it looks exactly like her. And then she talked to me too. And I didn't say like, hey, do I know if I've seen you before? But it was like she knew, she kind of responded to some of my comments. We had a little back and forth. And I just think it's so weird though, if it was her, like, oh, it's some cute girl I saw, and she never talked to me, but she like went and followed my YouTube thing. Oh, I still am happy about that. It's still more attention than I ever get from women. So I'm like, I'm going to stream for 2 hours today in case she finds my channel. Absolutely total global power, and then they will dictate what our religion is or isn't. Yeah, well, that's what happened. I mean, with communism, right? They destroyed their church there. Then the Jews took over, and then the Jews lost power in the communist government, and so they destroyed communism in Russia. And then I don't know. I think Vladimir Putin is a Jew. He looks exactly like one. I don't know. Maybe he's not. But I think that kind of happened in Russia, where they lost their power in communism itself. Stalin took over. The guy after him, they started bringing back religion. And then, so they had to get rid of communism. I mean, look at a picture of Benjamin Netanyahu and look at a picture of Vladimir Putin and look at them stand next to each other and tell me they're not like second cousins. You can't. I mean, and they're like, oh, they don't look like Jews. Like, there's something called the sheep nose Jew. Those two guys, they're the sheep nose ones. Actually, they're not all crooked hook nose ones. There's different variations, but even though you see people that aren't Jewish have these physical features as well. I mean, really, having a nose, like a nice shape on your nose, is a very European thing, you know? I've seen some Middle Eastern, some East African women here in Minneapolis, some I've seen that have like noses like that are like, there's this one type that you never see on anyone really, but it's very something that I think they had in Europe a long time ago and they don't even have anymore. Like it's the Archie one. It's the one that's like, I don't even know. There's a name for it. I read it in a book before. It's called like a Roman nose. So you'll see like these Muslim people with Roman noses. It's funny. But then I'm saying Putin and Netanyahu, they both have the sheep nose. They're sheep nosed. And I don't exactly know how to explain it other than think about that sheep and then look at the picture of them and tell me it's not a sheep nose. Okay. Plato's plugging his channel. He can do that because he left a lot of good comments. He says he has no, it's not entertaining, but he's got a lot of good info on it. Thomas says, one religion includes everyone, but in reality makes a few in control of all. Now, this is true, except for you're discounting the value of like kind of like the patriarchy and the tradition on the, what's it called, the apostles, the apostolic lineage. So the Pope is the chief of the church. He's elected by a group, a large group of hundreds of men, and they're all scrutinizing this one guy. And he's been in an institution for most of his life and had mostly all his actions scrutinized his whole life and that kind of thing. So what I'm trying to say is, though it could be that there could be one man in charge of the whole religion, it's not as if there's a lot unknown about him, right? Like there's a reason he's elected to be in charge. He's elected. So it's a democratic thing in a sense, right? But if someone, he's elected for preserving the church, you know, being a defender of the church. It's different from, say, like if someone creates a religion, they say, I'm a prophet and I'm in charge and everyone needs to follow this religion. I just created it yesterday. So saying one religion includes everyone, but it's a few controlling it, it's a simplified way of looking at it. John Vance wrote that Allah loves equality reminds me of secular Quranism men's. Hey, I didn't know you could read that. Up there it says Allah loves equality. I didn't know if you could see that. It's really tiny on my screen. I can't read it. I only know because I put it there, what it says. Out on the wire. Oh, Putin is playing the game perfectly. Are you a Russian conspiracist? Out on the wire. He's the danger. No, certainly Putin's powerful. I think he's one of the, if not, he's not the most powerful guy in the world, right? At least he's the richest. He has the most property and wealth, you know, at his fingertips of anyone alive today. Does that mean he's the most powerful? I would say no, but maybe, especially if I'm right about him being a crypto Jew. Tavistock. Silent Dangers, docs prove he didn't realize it until he did those videos. And the British are expediting it through Tavistock. Is Tavistock a word? What are you talking about? Uh-oh. Have I stumbled onto a conspiracy here? Tavistock, one I've never heard of. Maybe Plato made it up. John Vance says, the downfall of political dissidents is they stray away from the prophet's knowledge. Jesus, Muhammad, Moses, and Abraham. Yeah, I think John is good at writing. Some of the things that I've heard you say I don't always agree with, but Every time we write a little message in the chat, it's pretty good. And I think though this is true for everyone. No matter how much I talk and try to explain things, there's a break in the communication because of the technology. We're listening to each other through speakers that are replicating the sound of our voice, right? For whoever you're listening to on YouTube or whatever music you're listening to, even not just with language, but with music, with any sound, there's going to be some sort of, I don't know. It's easy for misunderstandings to happen. It's easy for feeling to get lost, especially feeling, because though this is kind of social, it's kind of antisocial too. In some sense, physically for my body, I've been sitting here talking to myself for an hour, though I know 5 people are watching with me. I really enjoy reading your chats. That's the best part about it, because it's almost easier to convey information, to convey ideas in the written word than it is from talking to each other through phones and over the internet. This is my belief. And I wish, we had a society that valued writing the way they did in hundreds of years ago when people wrote letters to each other. How beautiful is that? Okay, Plato's going. I'm going to end the stream too. I got a lot of viewers tonight. There's probably not a lot else on YouTube. Sorry. I've just been going for 2 hours. I need to stretch and rest. Sorry. Did I say sorry? I gotta go. Yeah. Well, thank you for listening. And it turned into an interesting rant about religion after I started talking about the COVID-19. As far as COVID-19 goes, I'm just going to say it's only the flu. Don't worry about it. If it ends up spreading here, we'll know in a few weeks. And it's only the flu. And I think it's particular to China and Chinese people too, and that it couldn't spread outside of from where it already took its hold. And yeah, they're not even teaching writing anymore. I'm the most sorry about that. Read and write, read, write, copy things out of books, become a hermit that's a scholar, and be a studioso. Ciao.